She left her little daughter with her grandfather for just one day. When the girl recounted what he had done with her, her mother was horrified and immediately called the police. What went so wrong even at her grandpa's house? Find out in today's story, and also we'd love to know where you're listening from today. It was an overcast day with a gentle breeze when Olivia and her little daughter Ella, holding hands, walked toward Arthur's house. The little girl looked at the iron gates that surrounded the property with curiosity. Noticing her daughter's apprehension, the mother decided to start a conversation to soothe her. "Ella, dear, I'm just going to leave you with Grandpa Arthur for a few hours, okay? I have to take care of some work matters, and I'll be back soon." "It's okay, Mom. I just haven't stayed with Grandpa before," the little girl replied, lowering her eyes. "I know, my love, but remember, I told you that he is your father's father. Although we haven't spent much time with him since Daddy died, he's still our family, the only one we have," Olivia explained. Ella looked at her mother and nodded, trying to be brave in the face of this new experience. With a smile on her face, the mother embraced her little daughter, kissed her on the forehead, and rang the doorbell. When the man opened the door, Olivia was surprised by his shabby appearance and sullen expression, even though he tried to muster a shy smile. Looking at his granddaughter, he said, "Hello, Ella. I've been looking forward to spending time with you. Today, we're going to have a lot of fun, I promise." The little girl shyly smiled and said goodbye to her mother as she entered her grandfather's house. Olivia waved at her daughter, trying to hide her worry, and walked away, returning to her car. But her heart ached, as she had never been separated from her daughter even for a minute. The young mother was a strong and determined woman with a life story full of trials and tribulations. Raised in an orphanage, she always valued the importance of family and believed in the power of love to change lives. The woman constantly struggled with financial difficulties and worked part-time to support herself. At the age of 24, she met James, a dedicated and caring young mechanic. The two fell madly in love and soon married, expecting the arrival of their first child, Ella. However, Olivia's life took a dramatic turn when a few months after the baby's birth, her husband tragically died in an accident. Since then, the young woman devoted herself entirely to raising and educating Ella, playing the roles of both mother and father. As time passed, they became inseparable, facing life's challenges together and supporting one another. This tragedy only deepened the bond between mother and daughter, making them true best friends. Mr. Arthur, James's father, was a solitary and enigmatic man who lived on the outskirts of town. After the death of his son, he became even more withdrawn, avoiding contact with his daughter-in-law and granddaughter. In the early years after her husband's death, Olivia tried to maintain a connection with her father-in-law, but every attempt to grow closer seemed to hit the wall of pain and sorrow that divided them both. Over time, the visits became increasingly rare until their connection virtually ceased, and now, it felt very uncomfortable for the young woman to leave her daughter with him. But she desperately needed to find a job and had finally secured an interview for a permanent position. With no one else to look after her daughter, she had to accept that the grandfather was the only one who could care for her little one for a few hours. As soon as Ella sat on the couch in Mr. Arthur's house, a shiver ran through her small body. This place was strange, gloomy, and lifeless. The 6-year-old girl felt scared and cornered. Fixing his gaze on his granddaughter, Arthur spoke with wide-open eyes and a slightly strained smile. "Don't worry, my dear. I know that my house might be a bit different from what you're used to, but I promise there are plenty of interesting corners. For example, would you like to see my special room?" he said, taking the girl's hand and leading her to another room. Ella tried to refuse, saying she was comfortable in the living room, but the man continued to guide her down the corridor, insisting in his eerie voice, "Come on, sweetheart, let's have some fun." Meanwhile, Olivia hurried through the streets with a heavy heart, regretting that she had left her little girl with a grandfather she didn't really know well. She arrived at the interview, which took place in a small restaurant with a warm and inviting atmosphere. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself and focus on the important task ahead. Upon entering the establishment, she was greeted by the manager, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile and professional demeanor. "Good morning, you must be Olivia. We've been expecting you. Please, come with me," he said. The interview began with questions about her skills and previous experience, but the poor woman found it difficult to concentrate on her answers. Her hands trembled slightly, and she stumbled over her words, unable to hide the nervousness caused by her daughter's condition. When the interview ended, the young woman thanked the manager and left the restaurant. She wasn't sure if she had answered well enough to get the job, but she knew she had to return to her little daughter with a secure job. So, determined to find employment, she spent the rest of the day walking around the city, handing out resumes and searching for other opportunities. As the city lights began to glow, the young woman decided it was time to return to Mr. Arthur's house and pick up her little girl. However, the return trip to her father-in-law's house was long and torturous. Olivia felt the weight of anxiety and uncertainty pressing upon her shoulders. She somehow sensed that something was not right. At that very moment, Arthur and Ella were coming out of a secret room where they had spent the day together. He leaned down, looking directly into Ella's eyes, and spoke with a mysterious smile. "This is our little secret, okay? You mustn't tell anyone about it." At that moment, the mother's doorbell rang as she tried with all her might to control her emotions. She eagerly awaited the moment to see her little girl again and to learn how her day had gone. Then, an elderly man opened the door, and she saw her little girl gathering her backpack in the living room. Something about the atmosphere in the house seemed to have changed, and the woman felt a bit confused when she realized that everything seemed fine with her daughter. As the girl headed toward the door, Arthur said goodbye to Ella, softly whispering in her ear. Ella nodded, and the grandfather stepped aside, allowing the mother and daughter to reunite. Olivia watched their exchange of words and gestures with growing anxiety. She wasn't exactly sure what had happened during her absence, but the air of mystery and the man's insistence that the little girl keep silent made her feel uneasy and uncomfortable. Then the young woman smiled at her father-in-law, trying to hide her dismay, and said, "Thank you for taking care of her today. It was a big help." Mr. Arthur smiled in return and, looking straight at the little girl, replied, "It's nothing. You can bring her over whenever you want." A shiver ran down Olivia's spine at the look he gave the little girl. They said their goodbyes and got into the car, heading home. On the way, the mother tried to start a conversation with her daughter. She was curious to know what had happened during the day. For a moment, the little girl hesitated, avoiding her mother's gaze, and replied, "We played a little bit." "What did you play?" Olivia pressed, feeling that Ella was holding something back. The little girl nervously bit her lip and uttered words that made the poor woman's heart race. "He showed me some things that caused pain." Olivia's face turned pale, and she tried her best to remain calm. Then, despite her inner trembling, she cautiously asked, "What do you mean by that caused pain, Ella? Please, tell me what happened." The girl shook her head, tears welling in her eyes, and said, "I can't, Mom. He said it was our secret and I mustn't tell anyone. I promised, Mom." Hearing those words, the poor mother could no longer contain the despair building inside her. As soon as they returned home, Olivia picked up the phone and called the police. Following the report becoming official and instructions from the police, the mother met with the officers. Receiving specific guidance, she called the old man and said that she needed to leave her daughter with him again for a few hours. He agreed, in such a sinister voice that the mother nearly burst into tears. And so they went back to his house. She tried to hide her nervousness as she handed Ella back to her grandfather, pretending that everything was fine, and then left. However, as soon as she stepped out of the house and the man closed the door, the officers began to monitor the sound from a hidden microphone in the little girl's sweater. Olivia's heart pounded furiously at the thought of having left her daughter alone with that man, but the police assured her that nothing would happen to her. The little girl was merely to be used as bait to catch him in the act. They listened to the conversation between the two of them, and everything seemed normal until the man said something that nearly made the mother faint. She started screaming and pleading with the officers to save her daughter from that monster. The police team acted immediately, bursting into the house in search of the grandfather and granddaughter. Olivia went with them, anxious and fearful of what she might discover. They entered the house carefully and quietly, so as not to frighten a potential criminal, and followed the sound of voices into a closed room. "Hold on to this, Ella. Yes, just like that," said the man. At that very moment, the officers broke down the door, and everyone was shocked by what they saw. Instead of a dark and grim scene, they discovered a well-lit mechanical laboratory with various tools scattered across the floor. In the center of the room, the old man and the little girl were working together on a small mechanical invention. Mr. Arthur asked, frightened, what happened? But no one could understand what was going on. The police exchanged puzzled glances and began questioning him. The grandfather, very embarrassed, said, "We're working on my little project, but what about you? What are you doing in my house?" "Olivia, is that you?" It was then that he saw the woman behind the officers. The mother, feeling deeply relieved, didn't know what to say to her father-in-law. Then the officers, noticing the surprised expression on the woman's face and not wanting to put her in an awkward position, simply said that they had received an anonymous tip and were just checking on him. An anonymous tip? About what? I'm just teaching my granddaughter, said the grandfather. Olivia, still with her heart pounding, looked at Ella and asked, Is that true, darling? The little girl nodded and said, Yes, Mom, I'm helping Grandpa build a robot. But you said it was a secret, the mother replied, embarrassed. Grandpa said it was a secret because he thought you wouldn't like it if I was messing with the tools. They cause pain, but Grandpa is always there to help me not get cut. It turned out that Arthur was in fact a talented inventor who was passionately interested in mechanics and robotics. He had taught his son James everything he knew, and they both shared a deep love for their creations and discoveries. When James died, the old man was inconsolable and had since devoted himself to preserving his son's memory by working on completing the invention they had developed together. Everyone present in the room realized that a huge misunderstanding had occurred. Olivia approached her father-in-law with tears in her eyes and apologized for doubting him. He embraced her and said that he understood her fears and concerns. From that day on, the mother and daughter began visiting their grandfather more often, learning about his hobbies and sharing precious family moments. Their relationship grew stronger, and Olivia started to see him as a father figure and an emotional support in her life. What do you think of today's story, and what would you do if you were in Olivia's place after hearing your daughter's account? Please share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for listening to Storyline Narratives.